Here we have breaking news on NDTV Profit. It is the final order of SEBI, the markets regulator, that we are looking at, this final order on the Adani Hindenburg case. Now, the regulator, SEBI, has found that all the allegations against the Adani Group could not be established in this particular case. There has been no liability that has been found on Adani Ports and the Special Economic Zone, on Adani Power, on Adani Enterprises, on Rajesh Shantilal Adani, Gautam Shantilal Adani, Jugeshinder Singh. Of course, as far as Milestone Tradelinks Pvt Ltd and Rehvar Infrastructure Pvt Ltd, none of these liabilities could be proven. And now we have the SEBI final order on the all-important Adani Hindenburg case. So no violation, no penalty has been imposed by SEBI in the Hindenburg case either. So this is the final order, and the larger takeaways that we are looking at this point in time. It is an important development, one that has been in the public eye for a while. You may recall that the US-based short seller, Hindenburg, they had published this report alleging that the Adani Group had engaged in what they called brazen stock manipulation and accounting fraud scheme spanning decades. And then, of course, those allegations included use of offshore, shell or related party entities in Mauritius, in Bermuda, etc. And there were questionable related party transactions and inflated valuations and bad disclosures. Now, all of this has been studied and investigations have been launched by SEBI, and now the final order is out. My colleague Vishwanath is joining us on the phone line to set the context for us for this all-important matter that we've been tracking. What exactly does the final order say, Vishwanath, if you can set the context for our viewers too?
Right, Vikram. So there has been an investigation into related party transactions with respect to Adani Group and a couple of other companies which are not directly linked to the group. Now, what we understand as part of the final order, what Kamlesh Varshney, the whole-time member of this markets regulator, has said is that there is actually no violation of provisions of the LODR regulations, which specifically look into these related party transactions. They also do not qualify as related party transactions. The specific transactions that were marked out by Hindenburg in its short seller report a couple of years ago. According to what the SEBI order says, plain reading of the LODR regulations reveals that the transactions between the listed company with unrelated parties is not covered within the definition of related party transactions. That's why this cannot be noted. Similarly, what the SEBI whole-time member is saying is that since there is no violation as such of the related party transaction norms, you cannot expect SEBI to levy any kind of penalties in this matter. Once it is held that there is no violation of the issues, it logically leads to the conclusion that there is no violation of all other related party transactions in the show cause notice that SEBI had issued earlier. Simply, what the order says is that once they have looked at all the allegations that were posed, investigated those through over a long period of time, they've come to the conclusion that there is absolutely no merit in these allegations, and that is why SEBI's order is important, and the directions that have been detailed today are important.
They indeed are important. I wonder if you've had a chance to speak to any legal expert. Of course, we are going to connect in a short bit, but does the fact that what SEBI is saying in its report, that the allegations could not be established, does it amount to a conclusive exoneration in the matter as it stands today?
Vikram, to be honest, I have not had a chance to speak to any expert yet. The orders just dropped, and of course, all of us are still reading through it. Having said that, in the past, whenever legal sort of experts have been consulted, specifically on NDTV Profit, about the merit in these allegations that were posed by Hindenburg, they've all unequivocally opposed those allegations, and they've said that they do not actually mean much. Specifically, there was a question whether the related party transaction definition, which was actually changed back in 2019, whether those still apply to transactions that were done previously. SEBI, in its order today, has specifically said that SEBI Act does not allow it to retrospectively apply new norms to previous transactions, and that is core to the entire discussion around these allegations that the SEBI order is pointing out. So far, whichever legal expert that NDTV Profit has spoken to, they've all very categorically said that these allegations don't merit too much.
Let's go across to Supreme Court Advocate Siddharth Luthra is joining us to get a legal take on this. All right, we seem to have lost connection right now. But as far as markets are concerned, let's just understand, because a lot of this is at stake when you talk about market reaction as well. And Vineet Bulinskar is joining us to put that in context for us. So I wonder if you've had a chance to go through the SEBI final order, Vineet, but tell us in your understanding the matter that was at hand that SEBI has looked into. Now, they found no liability on any of the entities involved in the matter or even allegedly involved in this matter. What does this mean for the markets, Vineet?
Actually, it's a complete reimposition of faith that no wrongdoing was done and that the Hindenburg was an entirely a hoax matter. And unnecessary damage was caused to the Indian markets and also to one of India's prominent promoters. We have been harping all the time that Adani stocks are extremely undervalued compared to the rest of the market. And it is my opinion that, we will see some very strong market action, especially in the Adani Group stocks. There are almost 7 entities which are listed. And
Vineet, if I may ask you to just hold that thought for a moment, because Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court is joining us and I understand he has to catch a flight. So I just wanted to take a quick perspective from him. Siddharth, if you can hear me, and thanks for making the time for joining us. I was just asking the same question from a market perspective, but when you look at the legal case that there was, and now SEBI has investigated, and there has been no allegations that could be established, is what the report says. So is this a conclusive exoneration where the Adani Group is concerned in the legal sense?
Yeah, I believe so. I would say that SEBI being the market regulator, SEBI being the domain regulator, it is a great shot in the arm for the Adani Group to get this detailed exoneration from SEBI, because to my mind, that's really within the jurisdiction of India. It's the last word on the subject. And therefore, I think it's a happy day for the Adani Group. They should be rather satisfied with what they've got.
So on the one side, we are talking about Adani Group and this SEBI investigation and the final order that we are looking at. But does it show regulatory robustness as well when you're talking about SEBI and the way and manner in which this was conducted?
Look, SEBI is a body which is regulated by detailed rules and regulations. There's a statute in place. And therefore, always keep one thing in mind. Always keep one thing in mind that when SEBI looks into these issues, it's working within the corners of the law. And therefore, you have now a finding which I believe, and I've not seen the report yet, would be within the corners of that regulatory framework, which shows that our system does work. So robustness, the rationale of the reasoning is yet to be seen, but the fact that there is a report is something for the Adani Group to share about. The report, of course, will have to be seen and scrutinized as time goes by to see whether they have left anything. So normally, I would believe that SEBI tends to do a fairly comprehensive job.
How significant is it that SEBI is finding no liability against them individually?
So one will have to, as I said earlier, examine the rationale of the SEBI in giving this detailed report and how they have explained their findings and analyze the material before SEBI.
Right.
It's not an individual specific situation, but it is the material or evidence-specific analysis which we have to look at.
Right. So I guess we will have to wait for legal experts like you to go through the order in greater detail, and we will reconnect. But Mr. Luthra, for joining us on this quick notice before you board your flight, thanks very much for your insights. Vineet Bulinskar, of course, is still with us. He's head of research at Ventura Securities. From your perspective, Vineet, do tell us, what message is this sending to global investors who've seen India getting rocked by the Hindenburg report? It happened in a big way in January of 2023. Are they going to see India as vindicating corporates now? And of course, this is an important one, considering what we've seen in the markets. The aftershocks were also pretty significant.
Yeah. So, both Ambani and Adani are the poster boys of the Indian corporate framework. and SEBI exonerating them and, clearing each of the individual directors with a clean chit suggests that they've done a very, very thorough examination. They've taken almost 3 years to arrive to their conclusions. And I believe that, this will lend a boost the Indian stock market from the point of view of, having strong corporate governance. And we should see reversal of flows coming through. And the Adani Group, which has been, been under the radar for the FII investors, will suddenly become the darling for them because, they are underinvested in one of the largest group that has exposure to Indian infrastructure. And, the valuations of these are at 50% of face value as far as Ventura is concerned. And we believe that with the entire market at, heady valuation, I think there's going to be a lot of catch-up rally in the Adani stocks and they would be running, outperforming the market in the short to medium term.
Vineet, do stay with us. My colleagues are still with me. Charu Singh is, of course, with us, and so is Vishwanath. Vishwanath, we are going through this report, and, of course, more information has to be gleaned from exactly what the SEBI final order is saying in this matter. Have you been able to go through the details and share some more information with us, Vishwanath?
Well, Vikram, unfortunately, this is a fairly detailed report, so we are still reading into everything. But see, the order specifically is about related party transactions or alleged related party transactions, I should say, between Adani Power, Adani Enterprises, Milestone Tradelinks, as well as Rehvar Infrastructure Pvt Ltd. Specifically, the allegation originally was that Adani Power as well as Adani Enterprises Ltd were funded by Milestone Tradelinks and Rehvar Infrastructure. That was done through Adani Infra Ltd. That was the original allegations, and this was back in FY21, according to the allegation. The report had got into how the transaction happened and the fact that these were related party transactions which were not disclosed to anybody in the market. Now, it is on this basis that SEBI has conducted its investigation and it's looked at whether it is factual, whether there is an actual relationship between these two companies or these four companies, and whether these transactions can be classified as related party as such. And undisclosed related party transactions are something that the market regulator takes very, very seriously. And the final order in this matter specifically states that the regulator does not believe there have been any violations as far as the related party transaction norms are concerned.
That's exactly right. And I'm wondering how the markets are going to view this. Vineet Bulinjkar, looking at these cleared entities that Vishwanath is pointing out as well. We're talking about an Adani Ports, an Adani Power, Adani Enterprises. So when you look at the business and the stock market implications on these companies, how do you read it?
See, basically, corporate governance is one issue which is very sticky with investors, and generally any doubts on those are, the stock leads to nobody buying those stocks. Now, with the fact that this has been cleared, it will see concentrated flows moving into the Adani stocks. Because, if you take all the 7 Adani stocks into consideration, they are among the top 500 companies of India. And, their institutional holding is very minimal. So we are going to see a lot of secondary market money moving into these counters, and they're going to move disproportionate to the bull market that we've seen in India so far.
So you're saying that we are likely to see this from domestic investors. We are likely to see retail and mutual funds also treating Adani as, for lack of a better word, de-risked?
Actually, over the last few quarters, the Adanis have improved corporate governance significantly, and everyone had become more comfortable with their growth story, and also the fact that all these negatives are factored into price. Now, the fact that these negative elements are going away, reduces the riskiness about these stocks, and we should see them draw a lot of investors to them. More importantly, Adanis will now be able to access deeper markets like the US for their fundraising plans, because, they have very, very big ambitions. In fact, they're talking of investing over $100 billion over the next couple of decades. So when you're doing that kind of long-term funding that you require for your ambitious plans, you need deep pockets and you need long-term credit markets supporting you. That will come through, and this is definitely going to lead to not only a re-rating of the P, but also provide the group with growth capital that they so desperately need to satisfy their ambitions.
But now, because we've been talking about this exodus as well, Vineet, when you talk about the foreign investors, so these global institutional investors now looking at this report, the ones who had exited, I'm just wondering whether, as far as the exposure having been cut in the past, as far as Adani companies go in particular, do you think they're going to return soon?
I think they will be returning in a tearing hurry, because if you do not participate in this kind of an event, post-event bull market, then you will not have that opportunity to create that magical alpha which is suddenly available to you.
Well, we'll have to wait and watch for that, Vineet Bulinjkar. I don't know if you can stay with us a little longer. I have another advocate of the Supreme Court joining us for that legal perspective. Jayanant Dehadrai is with us. Great to have you with us, Mr. Dehadrai. You tell us, as far as this investigation is concerned, it spanned over a year's time and multiple extensions had been sought as well. The length of this probe that we've seen, does it strengthen or weaken SEBI's case of neutrality? And the kind of report that we are seeing right now, how decisive is it going to be seen in legal circles? I'm sure you'll have to go through the report in great detail, but tell us, what do you know and understand so far of what has come out of this report?
Hi, Vikram. Good evening. I had the privilege of listening to the speaker earlier, and I think he's spot on. This report, of course, we're still going through the specifics of it, but this will have massive, massive ramifications when it comes to all of the entire bouquet of Adani stocks. And I think this is the ultimate imprimatur of legitimacy that any corporation can hope to get. After all, SEBI is the premier organization to determine issues of corporate governance and to also determine if there was any weight or any meat in the allegations that the Hindenburg group had been sort of peddling for as long as they had been doing it. Now, after the Supreme Court's, investigative committee, which also gave a clean chit, as you remember, it was headed by a former Supreme Court judge of unimpeachable integrity. And now, as you rightly point out, there's been an elongated investigation, a very thorough investigation that SEBI has conducted. I think it only speaks to the credibility of SEBI as the premier, agency to determine matters concerning securities and securities violations. And I think, if anything, this should give greater and greater confidence to both Indian and foreign investors. And I do sincerely hope that Indian investigating agencies will also try and get to the bottom of who those actors were, both within India and abroad, who were trying to destabilize the Adani Group and, via them, the Indian economy. So I think it's a watershed moment for the Adanis. I think they have walked through, burning coal and have sort of come out clean.
What about, on the flip side, the short sellers? Globally, now looking at how Hindenburg and this report, what it's saying, it claimed it was exposing India's largest corporate fraud. Now, with the rejection of those allegations by SEBI, does it undermine the credibility of short sellers globally?
I've always said that karma is cruel. And short sellers are not exactly good Samaritans either. They were really never looking out for the interests of Indian investors in the first place. They had come out with unsubstantiated allegations. There was absolutely no merit in what they had been peddling and pushing for as long as they had been trying. And if you recall, Vikram, apart from their failed attempt to sort of besmirch reputations, which is what they did in the first round, when that didn't work, if you recall, then they went and started targeting Indian institutions. That, of course, came to an end very quickly once the Supreme Court stepped in and ordered an impartial inquiry, a very thorough impartial inquiry headed by a former Supreme Court judge, Justice Sapre. So I think all of those issues now have been finally put to rest. SEBI has done a great thing. I think it is, after all, SEBI's responsibility to look out for the interests of Indian investors. But at the same time, SEBI is also responsible in a sense, for protecting the reputations of corporations that are responsible, members of the Indian growth story. So I think they've done a fabulous job, and kudos to them. And I'm glad they took their own time. They've done a very thorough investigation, which is what I've been able to glean from the very little I've been able to go through the report so far. But it's been an extremely extensive investigation, a deep probe, and I think the results now will, cause heartburn to those who wanted to hurt India, and it should be a reason for celebration for those who believed in the Indian growth story and in Indian entrepreneurs.
So, Mr. Dehadra, in that context, I wanted to ask if this is about Adani alone, or do you think this is about the credibility of the markets regulator, of the resilience of the Indian markets as well, in the eyes of global capital? Is that going to change a whole lot, according to you, looking at this kind of order from the markets regulator?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I used to work in Philadelphia for many years, and I have friends from university who are in the US and now are in, the banking space and the financial sector. And they all, of course, echo this sentiment that once your, the premier, regulating authority, which is SEBI in India and the Supreme Court, once they've stepped in, given a clean chit, this was the last thing that was really left, which, the last sort of probe that everybody was waiting for to come out. Now, once this has also come out, I think it will have a ripple effect very, very quickly. I think we'll see the impact tomorrow when markets open, but we will also see now the Adani Group getting greater unfettered access to global capital. I think it pretty much changes the game for them. And what you said earlier also is very correct. I think their attempt, the Hindenburg, this group, this sort of, this gang that came together with actors both in India and abroad, their primary aim was to try and hurt the reputation of the Indian growth story. And they needed a target through whom they wanted to achieve their nefarious ends. So at least insofar as that is concerned, this chapter ends permanently, in my opinion, now.
Does it now? And that's an important question I was asking. Another colleague of yours, an advocate at the Supreme Court, Siddharth Luthra, was also joining us immediately. And I was asking him if this case can now be considered closed, or there can be other agencies, whether they're domestic or international, that could pursue related investigations in this matter.
Vikram, many years ago, there was a very famous Indian jurist, Justice Krishna Iyer, one of the most respected. And in one of his judgments, he wrote about this penchant that a lot of Indian litigants have to go and interfere and to go and sort of, create trouble where no trouble is really needed. And he called them meddlesome interlopers. So I always, reflect upon that thought. And in India, unfortunately, there are a lot of people with vested interests, perhaps being controlled by forces outside India. That is always a possibility. So to say that this is absolutely final is one thing, but you're absolutely right. I mean, you can have a meddlesome interloper coming up at any point, perhaps taking up the report and filing another challenge. But I hope our courts are alive to this situation, because this concerns national security as well, in my opinion. When you try and destabilize the Indian economy, it really becomes a question of sovereignty. So this has to end somewhere. If somebody had actual credible proof or evidence, I've been saying it since the beginning, they could have come to Indian courts, they could have sought recourse, they could have filed a petition. They choose to do none of those things. And I think over the last 6 months, we've seen many individuals with vested interests trying to file complaints before the Lokpal. There was a complaint filed against Madhvi Puri Butch, who was the head of the SEBI. And we saw the result of that as well, that came to a naught. So there have been multiple attempts to try and hurt the Indian growth to hurt the Indian growth story, the Adanis in particular. And I don't think that has ended very well for those individuals.
Well, going by the report, it certainly hasn't. But also one wonders, because of the size and scale of the investigation that was launched, the length of time this has taken as well to arrive at this detailed report now, one still wonders, and critics would argue perhaps, Mr. Dehadra, if SEBI, having found no liability over here, if that really doesn't highlight any gaps when you talk about disclosure norms or related party transactions that Indian corporates need to address.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, one would need a more detailed look into the report. But you very rightly point out, in terms of related party transactions, which was one of the foremost allegations that the Hindenburg Group made, that has been, it's been proven that it was absolutely false. There's no merit in it whatsoever. In terms of corporate governance standards, even that now has become clear that there was no violation of any SEBI rules or regulations, and that corporate governance is being dealt with very responsibly by the Adani Group, which is expected of them, like any other large conglomerate in India. So I think this is very good. This was maybe perhaps a wake-up call for everybody, all the large corporations, conglomerates, entrepreneurs in India. It's a wake-up call that, look, there are other ways and means by which actors within India and abroad may try and harm your business. So please be alive to those, to those malicious actors. So now I think they internally, all of these companies would be sitting down with their strategists and coming up with ways to perhaps thwart such attempts to harm these companies in the future. So I think it's very good. It only makes them stronger. which is what I had alluded to even earlier, that I think this sort of an attack, a malicious attack like this, and once you've repelled it, and you've repelled it not using some private body or some, in some private forum, you have repelled it successfully in front of a government authority, the foremost government authority to determine these things. And separately, in terms of the judiciary, no less than the Honorable Supreme Court has said that there is nothing amiss in these in the corporate governance structures of these companies. Now, what more is needed? I ask myself, what more now do these people have to do to prove that they're clean?
When you talk about what more, as far as the regulator is concerned, and of course, like you mentioned, it's come from the Supreme Court, it's now coming from the markets regulator, from SEBI as well. We were talking about the robustness of the regulatory force that SEBI is when it comes to the markets. But should SEBI now use this moment, Mr. Dehadrai, to tighten some of the regulations around offshore funds, around shell entities, promoter holdings, just to avoid any controversies of a similar nature that could come up in the future?
Vikram, you ask an excellent question, and I have a two-part answer to that. One, in terms of the length and scope of the inquiry conducted by SEBI. Let's not forget that SEBI, in fact, has all the tools that were necessary for conducting an inquiry such as this, perhaps even greater tools, better tools than what the Supreme Court's ad hoc committee would have had to deal with an investigation like this. Which is why I say that the SEBI's clean chit in this case, in my opinion, has even greater value than the one, in fact, that the Supreme Court gave. That is the first point. Second, in terms of tightening regulations, in terms of access to offshore finance and so on, my personal view is that SEBI should not do anything that makes it less competitive for Indian corporations to operate on a global field, right, at a global level. So unless and until, there are proper, as long as there are proper disclosure mechanisms in place, there is enough transparency, there is freedom available to investors to raise red flags if they ever believe there are some, and all of these freedoms are intact. All of these options are available to investors, not only Indian investors, to foreign investors also. Right? So I think there are enough safeguards in place, and SEBI, in my opinion, should never do anything that makes it less competitive for Indian corporations to operate at a global level. That's my very firm view.
Appreciate that view, Mr. Dehadrai, and request you to stay on with us. Mr. Bulinjkar, who watches the markets very closely, is still with us very patiently on the phone line. Mr. Bulinjkar, I was looking at the Adani Group stocks. They rallied even before the SEBI order came out. But this kind of exoneration that is coming through in the SEBI report today, I wanted to ask you if you think this is going to accelerate the re-rating of Adani Group companies.
Absolutely. The re-rating will happen. As I told you, the entire market is at fair valuation. And investors globally are selling Indian stocks because they find the valuations expensive. Compared to the valuations of the Indian market, the Adani Group of stocks are at significant discount to their fair value. And, and with this exoneration by SEBI, what you're providing is a very low risk buying opportunity for investors to come in. And tomorrow, if stocks open higher, I think what is going to happen is not only in foreign institutional investors' interest, but also those of retailers and domestic institutions, is going to cause a secular rally in the stocks of the entire Adani Group.
My colleague Charu Singh has been taking a closer look at the report, and more details are coming out as we pour into that very detailed report. Charu, more information coming through. If you can walk us through what you've read and noticed so far.
So let's try to understand the entire order in a very easy manner and what were the allegations made and what has happened till now. So firstly, SEBI has not imposed any penalty whatsoever on the Adani Group, Gautam Adani, or any of the other officials or the companies that were named in the Hindenburg research. Secondly, no violation has been established. That means no, scrutinizing order has been made against the Adani Group at all. So any of the allegations that were made by the Hindenburg research have not been substantiated as per the observations made in the SEBI order. Now, coming on to what the allegations were, Hindenburg research, a short seller, had alleged that the Adani Group companies had used other third-party companies such as Adani Enterprises Pvt Ltd, Milestone Tradelinks or Rehvar Infrastructure to sort of give loans to Adani entities only, and then they showed that since these loans were repaid with interest, there was a trail of transactions which was coming under related party transactions, which is something not allowed by SEBI. However, the Securities and Exchange Board of India has said that the definition under which the Hindenburg research was saying that this is not right is not the definition that was applicable in India at the time the research was coming out, or at the time when the Adani Group was doing these transactions. In fact, this definition came to be the way it is after the amendments to it were made. And since these amendments are usually retrospective in nature, more often than not actually retrospective in nature, they do not really, they are not retrospective. They do not really affect the past conducts of the company, which means that whatever has happened before the amendment will not be taken into account, and that is why there is no violation established on part of the company.
So that really helps us understand the details that are coming through in the SEBI final report, which is a clear exoneration for the Adani Group. And I was just wondering, while Charu Singh is walking us through those details, Mr. Bulinjkar, the ambitious capex plans that have been brewing at Adani Group in the renewables, in the ports field, in airports, all that infrastructure, now that this regulatory clean slate, is it going to ease their access to global financing as well?
That's what I was exactly pointing out to you. So what is going to happen is that, Adanis already have a large number of individual investors who are institutional global capital who invest in the company. And every time a new project or a new capex is announced, that, it undergoes simultaneous scrutiny by all the institutions every time Adani raises money. Now, the fact that this has passed and exonerated them, what is going to happen is that Adanis, they need 10-year, 20-year, 30-year kind of capital, long-term, deep financing. That is not available in the Indian markets. And you will find these markets only in the US and maybe in Japan, where you can gain samurai bonds. So now you can raise long-term funds at very, very cheap rates because the corporate governance, stamp has been cleared, and the risk associated with group also comes down, which further reduces the cost of capital. And this is going to have a salutary effect on the true valuation of the entire group of Adani companies.
Saying it lower, I mean, as far as the cost of capital is concerned, that's going to come lower as far as Adani Group is concerned, especially in global debt markets, and that's an important piece from every angle. Also, bond investors and ratings agencies, they will reassess their risk perception of Adani companies after the SEBI ruling as well. So in that sense, the percolation effect on the Indian markets could be very significant. How do you see the markets react when we open for business tomorrow?
I think we'll be opening higher tomorrow because today we had the BSE, weekly expiry. Tomorrow is Friday, and then we have a long weekend. So we are not only going to see the markets rally higher tomorrow, but probably even go further on Monday, because as institutional investors assess this news, read into it, and they do their allocations, I think Monday will also be higher. So I'm seeing 2 good days of very strong positive action.
There has been a little bit of a valuation discount that has been going on as far as certain stocks are concerned. It hung over not just Adani Group stocks, but other Indian conglomerates as well, especially the ones exposed to a similar kind of scrutiny. You think all of that is going to now fade away?
See, obviously there will be a little bit of a sentimental effect on all the other players also, because when people like Adani and Ambani's are targeted, you generally tend to have a negative perception about a country and its laws and its corporate governance as a whole. And the fact that you're exonerated by SEBI, which was directed by the Supreme Court of India, that completely exonerates Adani's from this. And this will also have a salutary effect on other groups like the Jindals, the JSWs of the world, the Ambanis who want to raise deep, long-term capital at low rates.
This really helps set in context how the market perception is going to play out, Vineet Bulinskar, and we appreciate you staying with us with a lot of patience as we decode the SEBI report, which clearly gives this exoneration to Adani Group in the Hindenburg case. Thanks very much for joining us. Also on the phone line with us is Sanjay Ashar. In fact, he's joining us live on the show, senior partner at Crawford Bailey. Mr. Ashar, good evening. And this piece of news that we are still digesting, we're still going through in great detail. I'm wondering if you had a chance to pore over some of the bits in that report, but this ruling that has come out, the SEBI report, the final report that has come out in the Hindenburg case, how much does it play into this narrative of India versus foreign forces? Because I was speaking to Mr. Dehadrai just a moment ago, and he says it's a strong pitch that is being made as far as this report is concerned. This exoneration is rather significant. How do you see it?
Absolutely. It's a very significant report, and it's a very positive development as far as the country is concerned, the markets are concerned, the investors are concerned, and overall on the governance and other aspects as far as India is concerned and the Indian business houses are concerned. So it is extremely welcome development which has happened.
As Hindenburg is concerned, they were claiming it was exposing India's largest corporate fraud. So now, with the rejection of the allegations by SEBI, how does this undermine the credibility of short sellers globally, according to you? How is that perception going to change now, which would perhaps help the way the markets react in our part of the world?
No, obviously, one would read between the lines and know that, look, in order that I short shell, and then I have this report also published and issued, and then I malign a business house. At the same time, my purpose is served.
Mr. Ashar, we'll try and reconnect with, but this is an important piece that we are tracking in great detail as more and more information comes out of the SEBI final report, which is a clear exoneration of the Adani Group in this matter of Hindenburg. Mr. Ashar, now the Supreme Court had asked SEBI to look into possible violations. But now, as far as the regulator and the Supreme Court, we are seeing this exoneration come through. It has clearly strengthened SEBI's hand. Tell us about the kind of scrutiny from the court that we've seen. If you can help us decode the entire approach into this investigation that has taken place, that perhaps builds that much more credibility in the processes that India follows to look into allegations of this nature.
So, step one, it went before the Supreme Court. Step two, there was a committee which was appointed by the Supreme Court. The committee gave a green signal or a clean chit. Thereafter, SEBI in any event has scrutinized that. SEBI, after looking at every single piece of paper and after analyzing every single piece of information which was available, they have come now to a conclusion that, look, there was nothing in the report which is worth against Adani, and that everything was normal. It is just that the Hindenburg had made some false allegations on Adani Group. So in other words, the high-powered Supreme Court committee itself, which was extremely high-powered committee, scrutinized and gave the first report. And thereafter now SEBI, after a detailed scrutiny, so which gives a lot of credibility as far as the Indian scrutinizing agencies are concerned.
So it's quite clear that as far as liability is concerned, no liability has been found. As far as this particular case is concerned, SEBI has conducted an elongated investigation, and now we are looking at the final report, which is quite detailed in nature. But one wonders if this leads into that much more scrutiny, this episode, if it highlights any gaps in disclosure norms, in related party transactions that Indian corporates must address. Now that we've had this case, now that we've got a final report on it as well, the learnings, the takeaways as far as Indian corporate, the entire approach to look into scrutinies of this kind, investigations, the way they are conducted, how much of that now gets a proper play in terms of the kind of modus operandi that the market regulator follows?
Today we already have the processes in place as far as related party transactions are concerned, as far as any other aspects of governance are concerned. You have the audit committee, you have the regulations, you have the audit committee, you have the board, you have the general body meetings, and then over and above that, there is the scrutiny which the stock exchanges do. Stock exchanges do ask any questions, and further, if they find anything alarming, then of course SEBI is there in order to scrutinize. So, in other words, there are enough processes which are in place in order to see that the corporate houses do have their related party transactions or similar transactions in such a manner that does not are disadvantageous to the small shareholders or to any of the stakeholders of the company.
Do you see the need for any more tightening of regulations when it comes to promoter holdings, Mr. Asher? When you're talking about offshore funds or shell companies, do you see tighter regulations that are required for SEBI to put in place going by this particular experience, this particular scrutiny?
No, not necessarily, because there is already sufficient disclosures which are required to be made under the SEBI LODR regulations, under the SEBI PIT regulations, under the takeover code regulations, as also under the Companies Act. You have the significant beneficial ownership disclosures which are required to be made, as also under the securities law. So there is no need to do anything further.
Question that keeps coming back, Mr. Asher, is this, that are we going to see any more legal pursuit of this particular matter? Is this matter closed, or we are likely to see any domestic or global organizations that might take this up further?
No, to my mind, it's a finality now. It's a finality. You can't flog the dead horse. I mean, how many times you will do? There was two scrutinies have already happened. Why do you want a third scrutiny now? So to my mind, this is the finality now on this Hindenburg issue.
This investigation, though, has spanned a long period of time, more than a year, and multiple extensions also have taken place, and they were sought. But does the length of this probe strengthen SEBI's case as far as the way in which the probe was conducted?
Yes, of course, it does strengthen. It does strengthen, 100%.
So when you're talking about the kind of credibility that will return because of this case, we have been talking about the markets and how foreign investors have been leaving our shores to invest in other markets. Does the kind of valuation pressure that the markets have seen, do you see all of that changing drastically because a regulator and a Supreme Court have ruled in favor of the Adani Group and exonerated the group?
Yes, in my view, very much, because after a very, very thorough scrutiny, SEBI has now come to a finality on this. And so therefore, it does send positive signals to the world market, to the investors, that look, India is a place where governance is not an issue, where the scrutiny is not an issue. Everything is scrutinized to the last possible dot. And if at all there are any issues, those issues are to be resolved. So therefore, yes, it sends positive signal, and to my mind, it's an excellent development which has happened, giving to the investors that India is a place where you need to invest.
And what lesson should boards of other Indian conglomerates take from this Adani Hindenburg case, Mr. Asher?
Nothing. I mean, you just have to be careful on the related party transaction, on the ICDs, or any transaction which does require the scrutiny of the audit committee, the internal auditor, as also the board.
Mr. Asher, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on this all-important case. We have a SEBI final report on the Hindenburg case, which exonerates the Adani Group. But thanks indeed for making the time and speaking to us. J.N. Gupta is also joining us, former Executive Director of SEBI. Mr. Gupta, always a pleasure getting in your perspective, but what's your immediate take? Now we are seeing a final order. SEBI has conducted this, and the Supreme Court has also spoken about this, the manner in which this has happened, the time that it has taken for this final report to come through. How do you assess it in terms of the exoneration that's happening finally and the process that has been followed to get here?
See, when you look at the sequence of events, when you come to the today, the situation with this immediately after Hindenburg report came, almost everyone except those who were naysayers were of the opinion that there is nothing new in the Hindenburg report which has not been in the public domain for long. That is one. The second thing with this, that we always say that governance and compliance are two different ports. The Adani may have been little bit here and there on the highest standard of governance, but as far as the law was concerned, they were on the line. The third point that we have been saying is this Hindenburg report tried to implement the law of 2020 into the action of 2007, 2008, which is not a case to be done. Third, the Hindenburg report was extremely selective. They say that XYZ was arrested, but they did not say in their report that after some time he was exonerated by the highest court of the land. So that way it cast an aspersion on the intent of the Hindenburg report, and which was later on proved to be right, that they had an objection because they had very clearly said that we are a short seller and there were people behind it. What is the issue is here that people will keep on writing reports, either your competitors or people who do not like the country, who do not like you as a person, or whatever it may be. The problem with this, our system is such, one, we tend to believe all negative news. Second is this, our legal system is long by any yardstick. So if you say today, Adani can heave a sigh of relief that they have been exonerated of all the wrongdoing. But what about the loss? The loss is on various counts. The first loss is of the investors who, because of panic, who did not have the power to sustain, they sold in panic, although the most of the stocks retraced their previous level, except few. So those investors who sold in panic have lost permanently. The other thing is this, Adani Group also would have had a plan of development going forward. That plan could not be implemented because there was negativity surrounding everything. They also became cautious. If you recall, one of their co-investor from France, they also put hold on further investment. So now nothing can replace these losses or recover these losses, because neither I can or no regulator can compensate for the investor who sold in panic, nor nobody can bring back the time that has been lost by Adani. But the lesson is this, that we should always take any motivated report with a pinch of salt. And sometimes I've said pinch of salt may not be sufficient, it should be mouthful of salt.
A mouthful of salt is what you call it, Mr. Gupta. At that point in time, the markets reacted, and so strongly at that. Indeed, that is what one expects the markets to do. Yes, there are losses that are incurred. It had to take an investigation that was this long, that elaborate, to be able to reach at this point as well, Mr. Gupta. Certainly, you would have to say this proves the credibility of our system as well. To be able to reach here, to say something with as much credibility as we are today, even though the doors may still be open. I was asking the other panelists joining us whether this is conclusive, whether this matter closes, or this is still room that is available for domestic or international agencies to take this up further. Do you think that is possible as well, Mr. Gupta? Do you see this continuing at all?
See, I'll tell you, there is a limit to the capability of regulators.
Right.
If everything is within the four walls of SEBI, probably system could give you a judgment in 30 days, 15 days, 10 days, 1 year, something like this. But when you have to get the data or information from people whom you are not in control of, then you have to work at the pace which is determined by the other party. And I have always said this thing, that when Supreme Court gives an order to SEBI that finish this thing in such and such time, it doesn't realize that the person to whom you are issuing the directive has got limitation. They cannot write a letter that because Supreme Court has said that the Portugal or Lisbon or Turkey or USA or something should comply with our Supreme Court order and give it something. When Supreme Court, when they have got all their powers, they take a decade to decide an issue, then expecting SEBI or some other regulatory authority to do it in 30 days, 3 months, 6 months, that too when they have no control on the event or the documentation flow of information, is something not there. The issue again is this, I will repeat, that we have to improve the credibility. If somebody is saying that this is all humbug, we should believe this. Problem is this, if something comes from USA or something comes, we believe. And I always say, negative news has more credibility than the truth. That is the biggest problem.
Well, to balance that out, you have the work that is done by a regulator like a SEBI, Mr. Gupta. But if I was to ask you, which are the larger takeaways from this case that Indian corporates can learn from, that the markets regulator can learn from, what would those be, Mr. Gupta? Yes, not reacting to negative news is one part of the story, Mr. Gupta, but it's when allegations are raised that investigations are launched and their due process is followed.
See, I'll tell you. If a corporate does a wrong, it does a wrong because of two reasons. One, it is a deliberate decision, or it is a decision which has been done with a lack of knowledge about the law or interpretation of the law. So a corporate can always resolve the issue that comes because of knowledge or because of interpretation by reading various things because there are agencies. But if you do something deliberately wrong, you are knowing that you are doing wrong. As far as the regulator is concerned, I am no one to give advice to regulator, but I will say the regulator also understands that it has a duty to give its judgment or orders in time. But when they are not giving orders in time, it's because of various reasons. As I explained to you, they do not have control over the flow of information. But the second is many a times, it is the problem that the people keep on seeking time for information, time for reply, even if they are in India. So it's not a one-way thing that only SEBI can improve the thing. It has to be everything has to do collectively.
Certainly.
As you say in the courts, you keep on taking dates.
Yes.
If the court stop giving the dates, then you say it is violation of natural justice. But then when we do not give or somebody does not give the judgment in right time, then you say it is violation of justice to other people who are there. So
yes,
it is going to be a cat and mouse fight all the time.
That's right. So, but the entire network has to work in tandem. There's no taking away from that, Mr. Gupta. But when you talk about SEBI and the kind of regulations that it has put in place already, do you think you need to tighten some of the regulations going by this particular case, especially when it comes to regulations around shell companies or the kind of promoter holding regulations that we have or the offshore funds that we talk about, Mr. Gupta? Do you think there needs to be any tightening of regulations?
I will tell you, we can keep on tightening the regulations. There are two problems. One is till such time implementation improves or my follow-up improves, all the regulation will be done. But then we cannot stifle the system so much that a promoter or a managing director is busy only complying with the regulation and it doesn't have a time to run the organization. So there has to be a balance between the two, regulations and work. I agree that what happens, everything has to be exemplary. The problem is that when SEBI passes an order, probably most of the people are not reading that how they can work on this so that in future they will not be doing something wrong which others have done. So I think all the orders should become a benchmark for others to follow to avoid wrongdoings. That is what I would say.
Gupta, in that particular sense, I wanted to ask because, yes, this is about the Adani Group and the kind of investigation that was launched after the allegations were made by Hindenburg, a short seller. But is this about Adani alone? Or do you think this is about now the process that has been followed to arrive at this final report that SEBI has put out? It is about the credibility of the Indian markets and regulators. As far as the global markets are concerned and global capital is concerned, this is about that credibility that applies not just to an Adani Group.
I would say the Indian system, Indian markets, as far as the trading systems are concerned, the risk management systems are concerned, they are probably the best. I'm using the word with the emphasis, the best. The only thing is this, sometimes the credibility gap happens, and it does not happen because we ourselves are the people, we denigrate our system. That is where the problem has to do. We have to believe in ourselves. If you look at when Hindenburg report came, all politicians, everybody started believing Hindenburg truth as either Gita or Ramayana or Bible or whatever it may be, which is not the fact as has been proved. So the issue is this, we internally, if you recall, at that time people said the State Bank डूब जाएगा, LIC डूब जाएगी, सारे लोगों का पैसा डूब जाएगा. This is what was the narrative. So that type of narrative we have to avoid. The reason is very simple. You are not hurting your opponent, you are hurting your own clan also. As I say that if you look at the thing, the politicians were divided, the ruling party and opposition party. But did they forget that the clients or the voters of opposition parties are also depositors of SBI or insurance policy holder of LIC? They were hurting them. Suppose if LIC was gone, who will be hurt? Not they, not me, the entire at least 50, 60 lakh or crore of citizens of the country. So we should not be doing anything which hurts our own people. And without any proof, nobody knew what Hindenburg is saying. Nobody has gone into details. But yes, somebody has said, and somebody from USA has said, yes, it became as good as the earth is round.
Mr. Gupta, thank you very much for your insights. As usual, very informed, and of course, we look forward to your perspective on such important matters. So it is true, the SEBI final order is out on the Hindenburg case against the Adani Group. A clean chit has been given. Nothing could be established, no liability has been found, and it rests on the Adani Group as far as their leadership is concerned now to come out with a statement on this final order. But of course, we will be getting you all the latest updates. There is this regulatory exoneration that has taken place. My thanks to all our guests for joining us with their insights, both on the legal side, on the market side, and indeed the regulator side as well. This is something that we will keep tracking right here on NDTV Profit, breaking news on the channel. Thanks for making the time. Good evening.